She found the engagement ring receipt in her husband's desk drawer. $15,000 from Cartier. Her heart soared for exactly 3 seconds. Then she found the card. To my Brittany, soon you will be Mrs. Hawthorne. Just need to get rid of the baggage first.
She said she did it for the money.
Sarah was 7 months
How
pregnant.
could you do this?
She was the baggage. What happened next will make your blood boil. A husband who spent 3 years building a trap. A mistress who helped plan attempted murder. A best friend who sold every secret for money.
You have the right
And a
to
pregnant
remain
woman
silent.
who lost everything. Her home, her money, her family, and nearly her baby.
I love you so much.
But here's what Marcus Hawthorne did not know. The woman he called baggage used to make grown lawyers cry in courtrooms. The wife he thought was powerless had a mother who spent 30 years learning every dirty trick in family court. And the victim he tried to destroy was about to become his worst nightmare. This is the story of how one woman lost everything and took back even more. Before we begin, I want you to know something important. This story is not just entertainment. It contains real warning signs of financial abuse, real legal strategies for protecting yourself, and real resources if you ever find yourself in a similar situation. Here's the truth no one tells you. The most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is not when you find out the truth. It is when you decide to fight back. But sometimes, fighting back is the only way to survive. Every woman deserves to know how predators operate and how to fight back. This is a story about power, not the kind that comes from money or connections, the real kind, the kind that comes from refusing to stay down when life knocks you flat, the kind that comes from family who mortgage their house to save you, the kind that comes from standing up one more time when everything inside you wants to quit. Marcus Hawthorne thought power meant controlling others. Sarah Mitchell learned that true power means never letting anyone control you. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Marcus Hawthorne's home office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where Sarah Mitchell Hawthorne stood, 7 months pregnant, sorting through a stack of financial documents her husband had asked her to organize. It was a task she had done 100 times before. Marcus was meticulous about his paperwork, but terrible at filing. Every quarter, he would dump a pile of receipts, contracts, and correspondence on his desk and ask Sarah to put them in order. She never minded. It made her feel useful, connected to the business empire her husband had built. Today, however, something was different. Tucked between 2 tax documents, Sarah found a leather portfolio she had never seen before. It was expensive, the kind Marcus used for his most important personal matters. Curious, she opened it. The first thing she saw was a receipt from Cartier. $15,000 for a princess-cut engagement ring purchased 3 weeks ago. Sarah's heart lifted. An engagement ring? They were already married, of course, but maybe Marcus was planning something special. A vow renewal, perhaps, or a push present for the baby. He had been so distant lately, working long hours, traveling constantly. Maybe this was his way of making up for it. She smiled, running her fingers over the receipt. This was the Marcus she had fallen in love with, the romantic who had pursued her relentlessly, who had made her feel like the most important woman in the world. Then she found the card. It was cream-colored stationery, thick and expensive, the kind Marcus used for personal correspondence. His handwriting was unmistakable. Those sharp, confident strokes she had once found so attractive. Sarah read the words once, then again, then a third time, because surely she must be misunderstanding. To my Brittany, the card read, soon you will be Mrs. Hawthorne. Just need to get rid of the baggage first. All my love, M. The portfolio slipped from Sarah's fingers. Brittany, his executive assistant. The young blonde woman who always seemed to be standing a little too close to Marcus at company events. The woman Sarah had dismissed as harmless because Marcus had assured her there was nothing to worry about. Soon you will be Mrs. Hawthorne. Get rid of the baggage. Sarah's hands went instinctively to her pregnant belly. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if sensing that something was terribly wrong. She was the baggage, her and the child growing inside her. The child Marcus had seemed so happy about just 6 months ago. The child he had cried over when they saw the ultrasound together, calling it the greatest blessing of his life. All lies. Every single moment had been a lie. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the office, her mind racing through the past 3 years of her marriage. Every late night at work, every business trip that stretched longer than planned, every time Marcus had looked at his phone and smiled at a message he never showed her. She had trusted him completely. She had given up her career for him, her independence, and hence, her entire identity. And all that time, he had been planning to throw her away like garbage. The anger came first, hot and overwhelming. She wanted to storm downstairs and confront him. She wanted to scream and throw things and make him feel even a fraction of the pain that was tearing through her chest. But then something else took over. Something cold and calculating. Something that remembered she had graduated top of her class from Duke Law School. Something that remembered she had been a rising star at one of Charlotte's most prestigious law firms before Marcus convinced her to give it all up. Sarah took a deep breath, then another. She pulled out her phone and photographed the card. The receipt, the portfolio, the drawer where she had found them. She checked the metadata on the photos to make sure the date and time were recorded. Then she put everything back exactly as she had found it. The card and the portfolio between the tax documents in their original pile. He thinks I am stupid, Sarah whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the quiet office. That is his first mistake. She walked out of the office, closing the door softly behind her. She moved through the penthouse apartment that had been her home for 3 years, seeing it now with different eyes. The expensive furniture Marcus had chosen without consulting her. The art on the walls that she had never liked but learned to tolerate. The nursery she had spent months decorating for a baby her husband apparently never intended to raise. All of it was a lie. A beautiful, elaborate lie designed to keep her compliant and controlled, while Marcus lived his real life somewhere else. Sarah stopped in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom. She looked at herself, really looked, for the first time in months. A pregnant woman in expensive maternity clothes, living in a penthouse she did not own, married to a man who was planning to discard her like yesterday's newspaper. How had she let this happen? How had she, Sarah Mitchell, the woman who had once made opposing counsel cry in depositions, become so blind? But there was no time for self-pity. Self-pity was a luxury she could not afford. She needed to think, to plan, to prepare for the war that was coming. Because there was going to be a war. Marcus might not know it yet, but he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her mother, Maggie. Saw Marcus leaving early this morning. That man always did look like a weasel in a suit. Everything okay, sweetheart? Despite everything, Sarah almost laughed. Her mother had never liked Marcus. From the very first dinner, Maggie Mitchell had watched him with suspicious eyes, asking pointed questions about his previous relationships and his business practices. Sarah had dismissed her concerns as overprotectiveness. She had accused her mother of being unable to let go, of not trusting her judgment. She owed her mother an apology, a massive one. Sarah typed back a careful response. Everything is fine, Mom. Talk soon. Love you. It was a lie, but a necessary one. She needed time to figure out her next move before anyone, including her parents, knew what was happening. She went to the window and looked out at the Charlotte skyline. Somewhere in one of those gleaming office towers, Marcus was probably with Brittany right now, planning their future, laughing about the stupid pregnant wife who had no idea what was coming. But Sarah knew now, and knowledge was power. The question was what to do with it. She could confront Marcus immediately, but that would give him time to prepare. He would hire lawyers, hide assets, build a case against her before she had a chance to defend herself. She could leave quietly, but where would she go? She had no income, no savings in her own name, no recent work history. Everything she had belonged to Marcus, legally speaking. Or she could do what she had been trained to do: build a case, gather evidence, document everything, and when the time was right, strike with overwhelming force. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter kick. "I am going to protect you," she promised silently. "No matter what it takes, no matter what I have to do. Your father thinks he can throw us away, but he has no idea who he is dealing with." She turned away from the window and began to plan. 3 years earlier, Sarah Mitchell had been living her best life. She was an associate attorney at Morrison & Webb, one of Charlotte's oldest and most respected law firms. Her specialty was corporate litigation, the kind of high-stakes battle where millions of dollars and company futures hung in the balance. She was good at it. More than good. She was exceptional. Her colleagues called her the closer because she had a gift for finding the weakness in any case and exploiting it mercilessly. Defense attorneys dreaded seeing her name on opposing counsel lists. Partners fought over who got to have her on their teams. At 29 years old, Sarah Mitchell was on the fast track to partnership. She had a corner office with a view, a salary that let her live comfortably, and a future that gleamed with possibility. Then she met Marcus Hawthorne. It was at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital, one of those glittering events where Charlotte's elite gathered to write checks and be seen. Sarah was there, representing her firm, making small talk with potential clients, when a tall man in an impeccable suit appeared at her elbow. "I have been watching you all evening," he said, his voice low and confident. "You're the most interesting person in this room, and I would very much like to know why." It was a line, obviously, but there was something about the way he delivered it, something that made it feel genuine rather than rehearsed. And when Sarah turned to look at him, she felt something shift in her chest. Marcus Hawthorne was handsome in that polished way that came with money and good breeding. 40 years old, with silver streaks at his temples that made him look distinguished rather than aged, blue eyes that seemed to see right through her, a smile that promised adventure and danger in equal measure. He was exactly the kind of man Sarah had always told herself she would never fall for. Too smooth, too practiced, too good to be true. But that night, standing in a room full of Charlotte's most powerful people, Marcus made her feel like she was the only person who mattered. He asked questions about her work and actually listened to the answers. He made her laugh with self-deprecating stories about his own failures. He looked at her just like she was a puzzle he wanted to spend a lifetime solving. By the end of the evening, Sarah had given him her number. By the end of the week, they had gone on their first date. By the end of the month, she was falling in love. The courtship was intense and overwhelming. Marcus pursued her with a single-minded focus that took her breath away. Flowers delivered to her office every Monday. Surprise weekend trips to New York and Miami. Intimate dinners at restaurants where the waiting list was measured in months. He introduced her to a world she had only read about. Private jets, and exclusive clubs, galas, where she rubbed elbows with senators and celebrities, a lifestyle that made her comfortable existence seem almost quaint by comparison. And through it all, Marcus treated her like a queen. He remembered every detail she mentioned, every preference she expressed. He anticipated her needs before she even knew she had them. He made her feel cherished and protected and adored. Looking back now, Sarah could see the warning signs she had missed. The way Marcus subtly criticized her friends, making her spend less time with them. The way he suggested she was working too hard, planting seeds of doubt about her career. The way he positioned himself as her savior, the one person who truly understood and appreciated her. But at the time, blinded by love and attention, Sarah saw none of it. They were married after a year of dating in an intimate ceremony at the Hawthorne family estate. Sarah's parents attended, her mother tight-lipped and concerned, her father trying to be supportive despite his own reservations. "You do not have to do this," Maggie had whispered before the ceremony. "If you have any doubts at all, we can leave right now." No questions asked, Sarah had laughed and hugged her mother. "I love him, Mom. He makes me happy. I know you are worried, but I promise you, Marcus is a good man." Those words haunted her now. The changes started slowly after the wedding. Marcus began suggesting that Sarah cut back her hours at work. She was tired all the time, he said, stressed. She deserved to enjoy life after working so hard for so long. Then the suggestions became more pointed. Why did she need to work at all? Marcus made more than enough money for both of them. She could relax, pursue hobbies, focus on them as a couple. Was not that more important than some corporate law firm? Sarah resisted at first. Her career was important to her. Her independence was important to her. But Marcus was persistent, and he was persuasive. And eventually, she found herself agreeing to take a leave of absence. Just temporarily, she told herself. Just until she figured out what she really wanted. The leave of absence became permanent. Sarah told herself she was happy. She had time to read, to exercise, to decorate the penthouse exactly the way she wanted. She had time to be the perfect wife, to support Marcus in his business endeavors, to build a life together. But somewhere along the way, she stopped being Sarah Mitchell. She became Mrs. Marcus Hawthorne, an accessory, a decoration, a possession. She did not notice when her name disappeared from their joint accounts. Did not question when Marcus took over handling all their finances, did not protest when he suggested she did not need her own credit cards, her own bank statements, her own financial independence. By the time she realized what had happened, it was too late. She had no money of her own, no career to fall back on, no identity separate from the man she had married. And now, standing in the ruins of her marriage, with a baby on the way, and nothing to her name, Sarah finally understood the trap she had walked into. Marcus Hawthorne had not married her because he loved her. He had married her because he saw something he wanted to own and control. And for 3 years, he had systematically dismantled every part of her life that existed outside of him. But he had made schauen, beschreitendijktuts, what critical error. He had forgotten that beneath the designer clothes and the careful makeup, beneath the role of dutiful wife she had learned to play so well, Sarah Mitchell was still a fighter, and she was about to remind him exactly who he had married. Sarah spent the next 24 hours pretending everything was normal. She made dinner for Marcus when he came home from work. She listened to his stories about meetings and deals and office politics. She smiled and nodded, and played the role of devoted wife so perfectly that he never suspected a thing. All the while, her mind was racing, planning, strategizing, building a case the way she had been trained to do. She needed evidence. More than just the card and the receipt. She needed documentation of everything Marcus had done over the past 3 years. The accounts he had hidden from her, the assets he had moved, the lies he had told. She needed allies, people who could help her navigate the legal minefield ahead. Her old colleagues at Morrison and Webb, her parents, anyone who might be willing to stand with her against one of Charlotte's most powerful businessmen. And she needed a plan, a step-by-step strategy for extricating herself from this marriage with her dignity, her child, and at least some of her assets intact. Sarah fell asleep that night with her mind still churning, running through scenarios and contingencies like a chess player planning moves ahead. She was awakened the next morning by voices in the bedroom. Marcus was standing at the foot of the bed, flanked by two men she had never seen before. One was thin and severe-looking, wearing an expensive gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. The other was heavy-set and clinical, holding a clipboard and watching her with unsettling detachment. Sarah sat up, her heart immediately hammering. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, to the baby she had to protect. "Marcus, what is going on? Who are these people?" Marcus moved closer, his face arranged in an expression of deep concern. It was masterfully done, the kind of performance that would have fooled anyone who did not know what he really was. "Sarah, honey," he said, his voice gentle and worried, "I need you to stay calm. Everything is going to be okay." "What are you talking about?" "Stay calm about what?" The thin man in the gray suit stepped forward. "Mrs. Hawthorne, my name is Arthur Pendleton. I am your husband's attorney." "His attorney?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "Why does my husband need an attorney in our bedroom at 7 in the morning?" "And I am Dr. Raymond Harrison," the heavy-set man added. "I am a psychiatrist. Your husband has asked me to conduct an evaluation." "An evaluation?" Sarah looked from face to face, trying to understand what was happening. "Marcus, explain this to me right now." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for her hand. Sarah pulled back instinctively. "Honey," Marcus said, his voice dripping with manufactured sadness, "we are all worried about you. The mood swings, the paranoia, the things you have been saying lately. I think you need help, professional help." Sarah felt the walls closing in. "What things? I have not said anything. I do not know what you are talking about." Dr. Harrison consulted his clipboard. "Mrs. Hawthorne, your husband has documented several concerning incidents. He says you have accused him of poisoning your food, that you believe the neighbors are spying on you, that you have made statements suggesting you might harm yourself." Every word was a lie. Sarah had never said any of those things, but she understood now exactly what was happening. Marcus had been planning this for months. While she was organizing his files and decorating the nursery and playing the dutiful wife, he had been building a case against her, telling friends she was unstable, documenting normal pregnancy emotions as evidence of mental illness, setting the stage for exactly this moment. "That is not true," Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "None of that is true. I never said any of those things." "Marcus, why are you lying?" Marcus shook his head sadly. "See, this is exactly what I mean. The denial, the anger, the inability to accept reality." He looked at Dr. Harrison. "You can see it yourself, doctor. She is not well." Dr. Harrison nodded slowly. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I understand this must be confusing and frightening, but I am here to help. If you will just answer a few questions." "No." Sarah threw back the covers and stood up, ignoring the vulnerability of her pregnant body in a thin nightgown. "I am not answering anything without my own attorney present. That is my legal right," Dr. Harrison frowned. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I am only here to help. Then you can help me by leaving my bedroom." Sarah grabbed her robe and wrapped it around herself, trying to project a confidence she did not feel. "All of you, get out, now." Marcus's mask slipped, Just for a moment, Sarah saw the real man underneath. The cold calculation, the barely contained anger. The predator who had been wearing a human costume for 3 years. "Sarah," he said, his voice losing its gentle tone, "do not make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder for whom?" Sarah shot back. "You?" She turned to the attorney. "Mr. Pendleton, I assume you are here to deliver some kind of legal document. Whatever it is, hand it over and get out of my home." Pendleton's thin lips curved into something that was almost a smile. He opened his briefcase and extracted a thick stack of papers. "Mrs. Hawthorne, your husband has filed for divorce. Given your documented mental instability, he will be seeking full custody of the child upon birth. Additionally, you are being served with an eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." Sarah took the papers, her hands remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Full custody, eviction, mental instability. Marcus had thought of everything. "This is my home," Sarah said. "I have lived here for 3 years. "Actually," Marcus replied, all pretense of concern gone now. "The house is in my company's name. It always has been. You are just a guest who overstayed her welcome." He straightened his tie. "I will have someone pack your things." He turned and walked out of the bedroom, followed by Dr. Harrison. Pendleton lingered for a moment, studying Sarah with cold professional interest. "A word of advice, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said quietly. "Do not fight this. Your husband has resources you cannot possibly match. The more you struggle, the worse this will be for you. Take the settlement we are offering and walk away." "What settlement?" $5,000. "Enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from Charlotte." Sarah stared at him. $5,000. After 3 years of marriage. After giving up her career, her independence, her entire life. $5,000 and a demand to disappear. "Get out," she said. "Get out of my house." "It is not your house," Pendleton replied, "but have it your way. We will see you in court." He left, closing the bedroom door behind him with a soft click. Sarah stood alone in the room that had been hers for 3 years. She listened to the sounds of Marcus and his entourage leaving. The front door closing, car engines starting. Then the silence crashed over her. Her legs gave out. She sank onto the bed, clutching the divorce papers to her chest, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 10 minutes, she had lost everything. Her home, her marriage, her future. And if Marcus had his way, she would lose her child too. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable. Sarah cried like she had not cried since she was a child, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the life she thought she had, for the husband she thought she knew, for the future she had imagined with such naive certainty. But even as she cried, a small part of her mind was already working, analyzing, planning. Marcus thought he had won. He thought he had broken her completely, left her with nothing to fight back with. He was wrong. Sarah Mitchell had been a shark before she ever met Marcus Hawthorne, and sharks did not stay beaten for long. She wiped her eyes and reached for her phone. Time to call in reinforcements. The Starlight Motel was the kind of place Sarah would never have noticed in her old life. It sat on the outskirts of Charlotte, a faded 2-story building with a flickering neon sign and a parking lot full of cars that had seen better days. But it was cheap. $49 a night, payable in cash. And right now, cheap was all Sarah could afford. She had emptied her secret savings that afternoon. $347, squirreled away over 2 years from grocery money and small purchases Marcus never questioned. It was not much, but it was hers. Everything else was gone. Her credit cards had been canceled within hours of Marcus serving the divorce papers. Her access to the joint checking account had been revoked. Even her car, the sleek BMW Marcus had bought her as a wedding gift. was technically in his name. She had driven away from the penthouse in her old Honda Civic, the car she had owned before the marriage, the one Marcus had wanted her to sell, but she had stubbornly kept in storage. Thank God for small acts of defiance. Now she sat on the sagging motel bed, staring at her phone, trying to figure out her next move. She called her parents first. The phone rang and rang before clicking to an automated message. "We are sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Sarah frowned and tried again. Same message. She tried her father's cell phone. Out of service. Her mother's cell. Out of service. That was impossible. Her parents had had the same home phone number for 30 years. They were not the type to suddenly change all their contact information. Unless someone had changed it for them, Marcus. He must have done something. Cut their phone lines. Blocked their numbers. Found some way to isolate her from her family before she even knew she needed them. The realization was chilling. How long had he been planning this? How many moves ahead had he thought? Sarah tried her best friend next. Rachel Bennett had been her closest confidant since law school. They had studied together, celebrated together, supported each other through every challenge and triumph. If anyone would help her now, it was Rachel. The phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, it is Rachel. Leave a message. Rach, it is Sarah. I am in trouble. Big trouble. Marcus filed for divorce, and I think he is trying to take my baby. Please call me back as soon as you can. I really need to talk to you." She hung up and waited. 5 minutes, 10, 30, no call back. She tried again. Voicemail. She sent a text. "Rachel, please, it is urgent." No response. Sarah told herself not to panic. Rachel was probably busy. In court or in a meeting, she would call back soon, but the silence stretched on, and the knot in Sarah's stomach grew tighter. She tried her old law firm next. Morrison and Webb had been her professional home for 5 years. Surely someone there would help her. The receptionist's voice was cool and professional. "Morrison and Webb, how may I direct your call?" "This is Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Hawthorne. I used to work there. I need to speak to someone about legal representation. It is an emergency. May I ask what this is regarding?" "Divorce. Custody dispute. I need help." There was a long pause. "Please hold." Sarah waited. 1 minute, 3, 5. The hold music was relentlessly cheerful, completely at odds with the dread building in her chest. Finally, the receptionist returned. "I am sorry, Miss Mitchell, but given your circumstances and the Hawthorne family's relationship with our senior partners, we cannot represent you. It would be a conflict of interest." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone in her hand. Conflict of interest. The Hawthorne family's relationship. Marcus had connections to her old firm that she had never known about. He had closed that door before she even knew she needed to walk through it. She tried 3 more law firms that evening. Each one either declined to represent her or never returned her call. Marcus had either gotten to them first, or his reputation alone was enough to scare them away. By midnight, Sarah had exhausted every contact she could think of. Her family was unreachable. Her best friend was not responding. Her professional network had shut her out. She was completely, utterly alone. The baby kicked, a strong flutter against her belly. Sarah placed her hand over the movement, feeling the life growing inside her. Not completely alone. "I am going to figure this out," she whispered to her unborn child. "I do not know how yet, but I promise you, I am going to figure this out." She did not sleep that night. She lay awake in the lumpy motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, running through options in her mind. She needed a lawyer, someone willing to go up against Marcus and his money and his connections. Someone who was not afraid of powerful enemies. She needed evidence, documentation of Marcus's lies and manipulation. proof that his accusations of mental instability were fabricated. She needed money, enough to survive until she could get back on her feet, enough to pay for legal representation, enough to build a life for her and her baby. She had none of those things, not yet, but she was going to get them. The next morning, Sarah dragged herself to the legal aid office downtown. If she could not afford a private attorney, maybe she could get help from the court. The waiting room was crowded with people who looked as desperate as she felt. Single mothers with crying children, elderly people with stacks of paperwork, young men with haunted eyes. The room smelled of stress and stale coffee and fading hope. Sarah took a number and waited. 3 hours later, her name was finally called. The public defender assigned to her case was named David Reynolds. He looked like he was barely out of law school. His suit was slightly too big, his tie was crooked, and his hands trembled slightly as he reviewed her paperwork. "Mrs. Hawthorne," David said, his voice cracking with nervousness, "I have to be honest with you. Your husband has retained Whitmore and Associates. They are the most expensive family law firm in the state. They have never lost a custody case." Sarah felt her heart sink. "What are my chances?" David could not meet her eyes. "He is claiming you are mentally unstable. He has a psychiatrist's evaluation supporting that claim. He has statements from multiple witnesses saying you have exhibited erratic and paranoid behavior. Those are lies," Sarah said firmly. "That evaluation was conducted by a man who spent 5 minutes with me. Those witness statements are from people Marcus has bribed or manipulated. I believe you." David finally looked up at her, and she saw genuine sympathy in his young face. "But Mrs. Hawthorne, believing you and proving it in court are two very different things. Your husband has resources we cannot match. He has connections we cannot touch. And the judge assigned to your case has a history of siding with fathers in custody disputes. What are you saying? That I should give up?" David hesitated. "There is something else you should know." He pushed a document across the table. "Your husband has filed a motion to have your baby taken into protective custody immediately upon birth. He is arguing that your mental state makes you a danger to your own child." The room tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "They cannot do that," she whispered. "They cannot just take my baby. They can petition for it." David's voice was gentle but honest. "Whether they succeed depends on the judge. And given everything your husband has already put in place, the odds are not in your favor." Sarah walked out of the legal aid office in a daze. She found herself in a small park across the street, sitting on a weathered bench, watching children play on a rusted swing set. 7 months pregnant. $300 to her name. No job, no home, no family, no legal resources, and a husband who was determined to destroy her completely. How had her life fallen apart so quickly? How had she gone from a successful attorney with a bright future to a homeless pregnant woman with nothing? The questions swirled in her mind, but no answers came. Only the growing certainty that she was utterly, completely beaten. An old man shuffled over and sat down on the bench next to her. He was weathered and worn, his clothes faded and patched, his face lined with years of hard living. "Rough day?" he asked. Sarah almost laughed. "The worst day of my life." He nodded sagely, like he had heard similar stories 1,000 times. "Family court? How did you know? That look. Seen it more times than I can count." The man reached into a worn plastic bag and pulled out half a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. "Lost my own kids 20 years ago. Wife had better lawyers." He held out the sandwich. "You hungry? Looks like you are eating for two." Sarah's pride wanted to refuse, but she had not eaten all day, and the baby was kicking insistently. She took the sandwich. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the children play. You gonna fight? The man asked finally. Sarah shook her head. With what? I have nothing. No money, no lawyer, no one who can help me, neither do I. But I am still here. The man stood up, gathering his plastic bag. Listen, lady, I have seen a lot of people come through this park over the years, all of them going through hell of one kind or another. The ones who make it are not the ones with the most money or the best lawyers. They are the ones who refuse to quit. He started to shuffle away, then stopped and looked back. That baby is gonna need a mama. You gonna be there for it, or you gonna let the bastards win? He disappeared down the path before Sarah could answer. She sat there until the sun began to set, thinking about what he had said, about fighting, about refusing to quit, about being there for her child. The bastards were not going to win, not if she had anything to say about it. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Sarah answered without thinking. Sarah? Oh, thank God. It was her mother's voice, frantic and relieved, and slightly tearful. Baby, I have been trying to reach you for 2 days. Someone cut our phone lines. Your father had to drive to the neighbor's house just to make this call. Mom? The tears came suddenly, unexpectedly. Mom, I am in so much trouble. I know, sweetheart. I know everything. Maggie Mitchell's voice hardened into something fierce and protective. That weasel husband of yours thought he could cut you off from your family. He has no idea who he is dealing with. Mom, he is taking everything. He is trying to take my baby. Listen to me, Sarah. I was a family court paralegal for 30 years. I know every dirty trick in the book, and I know how to beat them. Your father and I are coming to Charlotte first thing tomorrow morning. What can you do? He has so much money. He has lawyers. He has connections everywhere. Maggie Mitchell laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus Hawthorne thinks he is powerful because he has money. But he is about to learn that there is something more powerful than money. What is that? A mother protecting her daughter. Maggie's voice softened. Do not give up, baby. Do not you dare give up. Help is on the way. For the first time since finding that card in Marcus's office, Sarah felt something other than despair. She felt hope. Maggie Mitchell arrived in Charlotte the next morning like a 5'2" force of nature. She took one look at the Starlight Motel and immediately declared it unacceptable. Within an hour, she had moved Sarah to a slightly better establishment with weekly rates, a working deadbolt, and at least some semblance of cleanliness. Then she got to work. Sarah watched in amazement as her mother transformed the small motel room into a command center. Papers covered every surface. A laptop was set up on the desk. A whiteboard had been propped against the wall, covered in notes and diagrams. Mom, Sarah said hesitantly, what is all this? This is 30 years of family court experience, sweetheart, Maggie smiled grimly. I may not have your law degree, but I know how these cases work, and I know how to fight dirty when someone threatens my family. Robert Mitchell, Sarah's father, sat quietly in the corner. At 65, he had the weathered look of a man who had spent his career dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. Retired now from the Charlotte Police Department, he still had the eyes of a detective. Watchful, calculating, missing nothing. Tell us everything, Maggie said. From the beginning, do not leave anything out. So Sarah did. She told them about finding the card and the receipt, about the ambush the next morning, about the lies Marcus had told and the documents she had been forced to sign, about the phone calls that went unanswered and the doors that had been slammed in her face. When she finished, Maggie and Robert exchanged a look, the kind of look that comes from 40 years of marriage, a conversation held entirely without words. That man is dumber than he thinks he is, Maggie said finally. What do you mean? He thinks he planned everything perfectly. Maggie pulled out a stack of printouts from her bag. But he left a trail, a mile wide. All we have to do is follow it. For the next several hours, Maggie laid out what she had discovered. First, the psychiatrist, Dr. Raymond Harrison, the man who had declared Sarah mentally unstable after a 5-minute conversation. Maggie had found records showing that his medical license had been suspended twice in 2 states for falsifying mental health evaluations. He is a hired gun, Maggie explained. Defense attorneys use him to discredit witnesses. Prosecutors know his testimony is worthless. If we can prove his evaluation of you was fraudulent, the whole thing falls apart. Second, the mistress. Brittany Cole had been on the Hawthorne Financial Group payroll for 2 years, but her salary was 3 times what it should be for an executive assistant. That is embezzlement, Maggie said. He is funneling company money to his girlfriend and disguising it as salary. The board of directors probably has no idea. Third, and most importantly, the hidden assets. Marcus had been transferring money to offshore accounts for years. The Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. Near as Maggie could tell, he had hidden nearly $4 million that should have been part of the marital estate. "How did you find all this?" Sarah asked, genuinely stunned. Maggie smiled. 30 years in family court, sweetheart. I know where to look and who to ask. Also, your father called in some favors from his old contacts at the department. Robert nodded from his corner. Marcus Hawthorne is not as careful as he thinks. There are people who have been watching him for a while now. What kind of people? The kind who are very interested in where his money comes from and where it goes. Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Can we use any of this? That is why we are going to see your young lawyer tomorrow, Maggie said. He may be inexperienced, but inexperienced lawyers are hungry. And hungry lawyers fight harder. David Reynolds stared at the evidence Maggie had assembled, his eyes growing wider with each new document. This is incredible, he said finally. If we can get this admitted into evidence, it changes everything. That is why I brought it, Maggie replied. Now, what do you need from us? David thought for a moment, his earlier nervousness giving way to something that looked like determination. We need to challenge the psychiatric evaluation, he said. If we can prove Dr. Harrison's history of falsifying reports, we can get his testimony thrown out. Already done. Maggie handed him another folder. Documentation from the medical boards of Georgia and Tennessee. His license was suspended twice. He paid fines both times. He should never have been allowed to evaluate anyone. David took the folder, flipping through its contents. This is good. This is really good. What else? Sarah asked. We need to prove Marcus lied about his finances. David looked at the bank records Maggie had gathered. If we can show he hid assets, we can argue the entire divorce filing is fraudulent, and we can request a forensic audit of everything he owns. How long will that take? Depends on the judge. But with this evidence, we have grounds to request an emergency hearing. He looked at Sarah. Mrs. Hawthorne, I have to be honest with you. I have never handled a case this complicated before. But I have also never seen evidence this strong. If you are willing to fight, I think we have a real chance. Sarah looked at her mother, her father, her young, inexperienced lawyer, who was willing to go up against one of Charlotte's most powerful men. I am willing to fight, she said. Let us do this. The preliminary hearing was held 2 weeks later. Sarah walked into the courtroom flanked by her parents, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. Marcus was already seated at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by expensive lawyers. He looked at Sarah with undisguised contempt, clearly expecting this to be nothing more than a formality. He did not notice Maggie Mitchell in the gallery, watching him with the intensity of a hawk watching its prey. David stood before the judge, his voice steady and confident. Your Honor, we move to have the psychiatric evaluation of Mrs. Hawthorne declared inadmissible. The doctor who conducted this evaluation, Dr. Raymond Harrison, has had his medical license suspended twice for falsifying mental health assessments. We have documentation from the medical boards of Georgia and Tennessee. Marcus's lead attorney shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Dr. Harrison is a respected professional who has been sanctioned multiple times for exactly what he is accused of doing in this case, David countered, manufacturing false diagnoses for whoever pays him the most. The judge reviewed the documents, his expression darkening with each page. Mr. Pendleton, were you aware of Dr. Harrison's disciplinary history when you retained him? Marcus's attorney hesitated a moment too long. We relied on his credentials as presented, Your Honor. His credentials as presented were fraudulent. The judge set the papers down firmly. The psychiatric evaluation is inadmissible. I am also ordering an investigation into potential perjury charges against Dr. Harrison. Sarah watched Marcus's face go pale. Furthermore, David continued, we have evidence that Mr. Hawthorne has been concealing marital assets in offshore accounts. We request full financial disclosure and a forensic audit of all accounts connected to Hawthorne Financial Group. Marcus's attorney did not even attempt to object. He was too busy whispering urgently with his client. Motion granted, the judge ruled. And Mrs. Hawthorne, you will retain all parental rights pending trial. There will be no protective custody order for your unborn child. Sarah burst into tears of relief. David squeezed her hand under the table. After the hearing, Marcus intercepted her in the hallway. His mask of civility had cracked, revealing the monster underneath. You think this changes anything? He hissed. You are nothing, Sarah. A nobody from nowhere. I built an empire while you were folding laundry. This is far from over. Sarah looked at the man she had wasted 3 years of her life on. She felt no fear anymore, only cold, clear determination. You are right, Marcus. This is far from over. And when it is, you will wish you had just let me go. She walked away, leaving him standing in the courthouse corridor with his expensive lawyers and his impotent rage. In the car, Maggie handed Sarah a small white box. What is this? Cupcake. Maggie grinned. Bought it this morning. I knew we were going to win. Mom, we need to save money. Sweetheart, victory tastes better with frosting. That is just science. For the first time in weeks, Sarah laughed. But neither of them knew that the battle had only just begun, and Marcus Hawthorne had weapons in his arsenal that they had not even begun to imagine. 1 week after their courtroom victory, Sarah arrived at the courthouse for a routine status hearing. She was feeling confident. The morning sickness had finally passed. The baby was healthy, according to her latest checkup. And for the first time in months, she could see a future where she and her child might actually be okay. Then she walked into the courtroom and her entire world shattered. Rachel Bennett was sitting at Marcus's table. Sarah froze in the doorway, unable to process what she was seeing. Rachel, her best friend since law school. Rachel, who had been her maid of honor at the wedding. Rachel, who she had confided in through every struggle and heartbreak of the past 3 years. Rachel, who had not returned a single phone call since this nightmare began. Rachel? Sarah's voice came out cracked and broken. What are you doing over there? Rachel would not meet her eyes. Marcus's attorney rose smoothly from his seat. Your Honor, we would like to introduce our new co-counsel, Ms. Rachel Bennett. She is also prepared to give testimony regarding Mrs. Hawthorne's character and mental state. New co-counsel, testimony. Character and mental state. Sarah understood then. She understood everything. Rachel had been working for Marcus all along. The hearing proceeded like a waking nightmare. Rachel took the stand, her face carefully blank, and delivered testimony that was designed to destroy Sarah completely. Sarah has always been emotionally unstable, Rachel said, her voice flat and rehearsed. In college, she had a complete breakdown during finals week. She has talked about harming herself on multiple occasions. She once told me she was not sure she was ready to be a mother. She said she was afraid she would hurt her baby. Every word was a knife. These were things Sarah had shared in private, vulnerable moments. The stress of law school exams, which everyone felt. The normal doubts every pregnant woman experiences. Confidences shared with a trusted friend now twisted into weapons. You are lying. Sarah was on her feet before she knew it. I trusted you. How could you do this? Mrs. Hawthorne, the judge said sharply, sit down immediately, or I will hold you in contempt. David pulled her back into her chair. She was shaking so badly she could barely stay upright. The testimony continued for another 20 minutes. Rachel painted a picture of a woman who was unstable, unreliable, potentially dangerous. Everything was either a complete fabrication or a truth warped beyond recognition. When it was finally over, Sarah felt hollowed out, empty, like Rachel had reached inside her and scooped out everything that made her human. David caught up with her in the hallway after the hearing. His face was grim. I found out what happened, he said quietly. Marcus has been paying off Rachel's law school debt. $180,000. In exchange, she has been feeding him information about you for months. Months? Sarah felt like she might vomit. How long? Since before you found the card. Since before any of this started. She was reporting everything. Every conversation. Every text. Every strategy we discussed. He knew every move before we made it. Sarah leaned against the wall, her legs threatening to give out. She was supposed to be my friend. My best friend. David was silent. There was nothing he could say. Maggie appeared, her face dark with fury. That woman is going to rot in hell for what she did. Mom, Sarah whispered, I do not know if I can do this anymore. Everyone I trusted, everyone I thought was on my side, they have all been bought or manipulated. I have nothing left. Maggie grabbed her daughter's shoulders, forcing Sarah to look at her. You have us. You have David. You have that baby inside you who needs her mother to keep fighting. You are not nothing, Sarah. You are a Mitchell, and Mitchells do not quit. But Sarah could not respond. The betrayal was too complete, too devastating to process. She went back to her motel room alone that night, sat on the bed, stared at her phone, every text message she had ever sent to Rachel, every tearful phone call, every secret she had shared in a moment of vulnerability. All of it had been reported back to Marcus. All of it had been used to build a case against her. I have no one, Sarah whispered to the empty room. Everyone I trusted has been bought or blocked. I am completely alone. Her hands went to her belly. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, almost alone. She lay down on the bed, curling protectively around her unborn child, and cried herself to sleep. The temporary custody hearing was held 2 weeks after Rachel's betrayal. Sarah walked into the courtroom knowing she was fighting an uphill battle, but she had not realized how steep that hill would be. Marcus's team presented their case with surgical precision. Rachel's testimony about Sarah's mental instability. Bank records showing Sarah had less than $200 in her account. Documentation proving she was living in a budget motel. Expert witnesses who questioned whether a woman in her circumstances could possibly provide adequate care for a newborn. Your Honor, Marcus's attorney argued, Mrs. Hawthorne cannot provide a stable environment for a child. She has no permanent housing, no income, no support system. The child would be at risk. David fought back with everything he had, but it was like trying to hold back a flood with a paper cup. Every argument was countered. Every piece of evidence was dismissed or diminished. The machinery of Marcus's wealth and influence ground forward relentlessly. Then Marcus took the stand. He cried, actually cried, or produced a convincing enough imitation that even Sarah found herself momentarily wondering if the emotion was real. Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice breaking with manufactured sorrow. I love my wife. I have always loved her. All I wanted was to help her, to get her the treatment she needs. But she has become paranoid, delusional. She accuses me of things I would never do. He paused, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than Sarah's weekly motel bill. I am terrified for my child. What if something happens when she is alone with the baby? What if her mental state deteriorates further? I could never forgive myself if harm came to my son or daughter, because I did not act to protect them. Sarah watched the judge's face soften with sympathy. For Marcus, the man who had spent 3 years methodically destroying her life was now playing the victim, and it was working. The ruling came down like a guillotine. Given the totality of circumstances presented, the judge said, I am granting Mr. Hawthorne temporary custody of the child upon birth. Mrs. Hawthorne will have supervised visitation only, pending completion of a full psychological evaluation by a court-appointed psychiatrist. The world stopped. Sarah heard the words, but they did not seem real. Temporary custody, supervised visitation, psychological evaluation. They were going to take her baby, the baby she had carried for 7 months, the baby she had talked to every night, promising to protect it no matter what, the baby that was the only good thing to come from her disastrous marriage. They were going to hand her child to the man who had lied and cheated and manipulated his way through their entire relationship. She heard herself speaking, though the words seemed to come from somewhere far away. Please, please, you cannot do this. I am not mentally ill. I am not a danger to anyone. I am just a pregnant woman who got divorced by a man with better lawyers. Mrs. Hawthorne, the judge said coldly, emotional outbursts like this are precisely why I am concerned about your stability. The hearing ended. David led Sarah out of the courtroom, supporting her arm because her legs had apparently stopped working properly. Outside, she found a bench and collapsed onto it. A few minutes later, someone sat down beside her. She looked up to see the homeless man from the park, the one who had given her half his sandwich weeks ago. Back again? He asked. They are taking my baby. The man was quiet for a long moment. That is worse than mine. I just got a parking ticket today. He paused. You gonna keep fighting? Sarah did not answer. She was not sure she had any fight left. Listen, the man said. I told you before. The people who make it through hell are not the ones with the most money. They are the ones who refuse to quit. He stood up, adjusting his worn coat. That baby is gonna need a mama? You gonna be that mama, or you gonna let the bastards win? He walked away before she could respond. Sarah sat there until darkness fell. Then she went back to her motel room and called David. Find me everything you can on Marcus's financial records, she said. Every transaction, every transfer, every hidden account. I am not done yet. Sarah, David said hesitantly, after today, I am not sure what else we can do. I am a lawyer, David, and I am about to be a mother. I have a case to build and a child to protect. So no, I am not giving up. I am getting started. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. All right, David said finally. Let us see what we can find. Sarah threw herself into building her case with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including herself. She found a job working night shifts at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Charlotte. It was humiliating work for a former corporate attorney, pouring coffee, serving pie, cleaning up messes left by drunk customers at 3 in the morning. But it proved she could support herself. Every paycheck went into a savings account with only her name on it. Every shift was documented, creating a paper trail that showed she was responsible, reliable, employed. She moved out of the motel and into a small apartment in a modest part of town. 400 square feet, barely room for a bed and a crib, but it was clean and safe and hers. The lease was in her name. The utilities were in her name. For the first time in years, she had something that belonged to her alone. Maggie and Robert mortgaged their house to hire a private investigator. When Sarah protested, her mother shut her down immediately. "That is my grandbaby," Maggie said, fiercely, "and you are my daughter. There is nothing in this world I would not do for either of you. Now stop arguing and let us get to work." The investigator, a former FBI agent named Frank Wheeler, was worth every penny of what they paid him. 2 weeks later, he delivered his findings. "Brittany Cole has a criminal record," Frank said, spreading documents across Sarah's tiny kitchen table. "Fraud charges from 5 years ago. Credit card schemes, identity theft, the works." The charges were mysteriously dropped right around the time she started working for Marcus. Sarah leaned forward. "What else?" "Hawthorne Financial Group is under federal investigation for money laundering. The FBI has been building a case for over a year. Your husband does not know it yet, but he is about to have much bigger problems than a divorce." A fierce satisfaction spread through Sarah's chest. "And the hidden assets? $4 million in offshore accounts, just like your mother suspected. But there is more." Frank pulled out another document. Marcus took out a massive loan against his company's shares 3 years ago. He used it to pay off gambling debts in Las Vegas and Macau. The loan is held by a private equity firm, and he has missed the last 2 payment deadlines. The man is leveraged up to his eyeballs. One wrong move, and his whole empire comes crashing down. David called that same evening with news of his own. "Sarah, I found something huge. The prenup you signed?" "I tracked down the original draft from Marcus's previous attorney. The version you signed is different. Paragraphs were removed, terms were altered. You were defrauded." "What does that mean?" "It means the prenup is almost certainly void. Fraud in the execution. If I can prove this to the judge, you are entitled to half of everything Marcus owns, including those hidden millions." The second hearing was held on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves on the courthouse lawn had turned gold and red, and Sarah felt like the season of her own life was finally changing. David presented the evidence of the fraudulent prenup with methodical precision. He exposed the hidden offshore accounts with damning documentation. He revealed Brittany's criminal history and her suspicious salary, painting a picture of systematic corruption. The judge's expression grew darker with each new revelation. "Mr. Hawthorne," the judge said, "you testified under oath that you had fully disclosed all marital assets. Are you now telling this court that you have $4 million in offshore accounts that were never declared?" Marcus had gone pale. His expensive attorneys were huddled together, whispering frantically, searching for an escape route that did not exist. "Your Honor," Marcus's lead attorney stammered, "we would like to request a continuance to address these new allegations." Denied. The judge turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I am reversing my temporary custody order. You will retain custody of your child upon birth. Furthermore, I am ordering a full forensic audit of Mr. Hawthorne's finances." Sarah burst into tears of relief. That evening, Maggie and Robert took her out for dinner at a real restaurant. The first nice meal she had eaten in months. Robert raised his glass. "To my daughter, the toughest woman I know," Maggie clinked her glass against his. "And to my grandbaby, who is going to have one hell of a story to tell someday." Sarah looked at her parents, at David, who had become a true friend, at the evidence they had gathered through sheer determination and hard work. For the first time in months, She felt like everything might actually be okay. She should have known better. 3 days after her courtroom victory, Sarah was walking to her car after finishing her shift at the diner. It was nearly midnight. The parking lot was almost empty, illuminated only by a few flickering streetlights. She did not see the black SUV until it was too late. It came out of nowhere, no headlights. Engine roaring. Moving fast, too fast. Sarah dove to the side instinctively, but the vehicle still clipped her. She spun through the air, her body curling protectively around her pregnant belly, and crashed into a parked car. She hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her side, her arm, her head. And then, worse than any of that, she felt something shift inside her. The baby. Help! She screamed. Someone help me! The SUV peeled away, tires screeching, disappearing into the night. Sarah lay on the cold asphalt, watching its taillights vanish. Feeling warm wetness spreading beneath her, she was bleeding. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. The paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing her, cutting away her clothes, shouting medical terminology she could barely process through the haze of pain and terror. By the time they reached the emergency room, it was clear that the baby was in distress. They prepped her for an emergency cesarean section. The last thing Sarah saw before the anesthesia pulled her under was a team of doctors and nurses moving with desperate urgency. "Please," she whispered, "save my baby." She woke up alone. The room was dim and quiet, filled with the soft beeping of monitors. Sarah's hand went immediately to her stomach, finding bandages and an unfamiliar flatness where her baby had been. Panic seized her heart. My baby. Where is my baby? A nurse appeared at her bedside, her face carefully composed. "Mrs. Hawthorne, please try to stay calm. Your daughter was born at 34 weeks. She is small, but she is alive. She is in the NICU. A daughter. Sarah had a daughter. I need to see her." The nurse hesitated. "Mrs. Hawthorne, there are some people who need to speak with you first." A detective entered the room. His face was grim, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Ma'am, I am Detective Morrison. We reviewed the security footage from the diner parking lot. That SUV was waiting for you. It was parked in a dark corner for over an hour before you came out. When you appeared, it pulled out and accelerated directly toward you." Sarah's blood went cold. It was not an accident. No, ma'am. It was attempted murder. "Marcus." "We cannot prove that connection yet," the detective admitted. "The license plates on the SUV were stolen. We are working on tracking down the vehicle and the driver. But you should know that you are lucky to be alive." After the detective left, Sarah was finally allowed to see her daughter. The baby was so small, so impossibly small. She lay in an incubator in the NICU, hooked up to monitors and tubes, her tiny chest rising and falling with each labored breath. "She is a fighter," a nurse said gently, "just like her mama." Sarah pressed her hand against the glass, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry I could not protect you." 2 days later, while Sarah was still recovering from surgery, Marcus struck again. His attorneys filed an emergency motion claiming Sarah was medically incapacitated and could not provide adequate care for a newborn. But that was not the worst part. A hospital administrator appeared in Sarah's room, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Hawthorne, we need to discuss your toxicology results." "My what?" "Your blood work from when you were admitted. It showed traces of opioids." Sarah stared at her. "That is impossible. I have not taken any drugs. I do not even take aspirin when I have a headache." The administrator shifted uncomfortably. "The results are what they are. Given the circumstances, we were required to report them to the court." Sarah understood then. Someone had drugged her. Someone had put something in her IV, or slipped something into her food, or found some other way to make sure those chemicals appeared in her blood, Marcus. It had to be Marcus, or someone working for him. At an emergency hearing held in a hospital conference room, Marcus's attorneys presented the toxicology report as evidence that Sarah was unfit to be a mother. The judge, faced with medical documentation he could not ignore, had no choice. Given the medical circumstances, I am placing the infant in temporary custody of the father until Mrs. Hawthorne can demonstrate that she is fully recovered and substance-free. They took her baby from the NICU. Sarah screamed. She screamed until the nurses sedated her, until the darkness pulled her under, until she could not feel anything anymore. When she woke, she was alone in an empty hospital room. Her daughter was gone. Her body was broken, and no one believed her. Sarah was released from the hospital a week later. She returned to her tiny apartment, sat down in front of the empty crib, and stared at nothing. Everything had been taken from her. Her baby was with Marcus. Her job had fired her for missing too many shifts. Her parents' house was in foreclosure because of all the money they had spent on investigators and legal fees. David had stopped returning her calls, not because he had abandoned her, but because he had nothing left to offer. He was a young public defender with limited resources, going up against an army of high-powered attorneys. He had fought hard, but there was only so much one person could do. Maybe he is right, Sarah thought, staring at the empty crib. Maybe I am not strong enough. Maybe my daughter would be better off without me. The thought terrified her, not because it was cruel, but because a part of her was starting to believe it. She sat there for hours, lost in a despair so deep it felt like drowning. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer. But something made her reach out, made her swipe the screen. Mrs. Hawthorne? The voice was cultured and controlled, vaguely familiar. My name is Caroline Ashford. I am, Marcus's mother. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? Before you hang up, let me tell you something. I know my son tried to kill you. I know he had someone drug you in the hospital, and I know exactly where the evidence is to prove it. Silence stretched between them. Why would you tell me this? Sarah finally asked. Because I despise my son, and I am not going to let him raise my granddaughter. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of Charlotte, the kind of place where no one asked questions and no one paid attention to who came and went. Caroline Ashford was exactly what Sarah had expected a Hawthorne matriarch to be. Elegant, composed, intimidating. But there was something else in her eyes, something that looked almost like guilt. I will be blunt, Caroline said, stirring her tea with practiced grace. I raised a monster. I have spent 20 years watching Marcus destroy everything and everyone he touches. His first wife, his second wife, countless other women in between. Sarah's jaw dropped. His first wife? He told me he had never been married before? He lies about everything. Caroline set down her spoon. You are his third wife, Sarah. The first one, Jennifer, took a settlement and signed a non-disclosure agreement after he broke her arm. The second one, Michelle, disappeared 3 years ago. I do not know what happened to her, and I am afraid to ask. Why are you telling me this now? Why not before? Because of my granddaughter. Caroline's carefully composed facade cracked, just for a moment. I watched my own husband destroy our family. I was too weak to stop him. Marcus became what he is because I failed to protect him from his father's influence. But that baby is innocent, and I will not let history repeat itself. She slid a USB drive across the table. What is this? Everything. Recordings of Marcus and Brittany discussing the accident before it happened. Evidence that Brittany paid a hospital employee to put opioids in your IV. Financial records showing the full extent of the money laundering. Testimony from Jennifer, Marcus's first wife, who is willing to come forward. Sarah stared at the small device. It felt impossibly light for something that could change everything. Why did you not use this yourself? Because he would know it came from me, and he would find a way to bury it, just like he buries everything else. Caroline met Sarah's eyes. I need someone with nothing left to lose. Someone who will not stop until Marcus faces justice. You have every reason to want him destroyed, and now you have the weapons to do it. Sarah picked up the USB drive. I never expected help from you. I thought you hated me. I hated that I knew what he would do to you, and I could not stop it. Caroline stood, gathering her purse. Make him pay, Sarah, for both of us, for all the women he has hurt. And most importantly, for that little girl who deserves better than Marcus Hawthorne as a father. That night, Sarah gathered her team in her tiny apartment. Maggie, Robert, David, who had come back the moment she called with news. And now, Caroline, working in secret against her own son. They reviewed the evidence on the USB drive. It was damning beyond anything Sarah had imagined. Audio recordings of Marcus and Brittany planning the accident. We just need to scare her, Marcus's voice said on the recording. Maybe rough her up a little, make her lose the baby. Then we can say she is mentally unstable and take custody without any problems. Text messages between Brittany and a hospital employee named James Walsh. $5,000 to add something to her IV. Make it look like she is using drugs. Nobody will believe anything she says after that. Financial records showing wire transfers to offshore accounts, shell companies, and suspicious entities that federal investigators had been tracking for months. Robert used his old police contacts to dig deeper. The SUV that hit Sarah had been rented by Brittany's brother using a fake ID. The fake ID had been made by a forger Marcus had used before. We have enough, David said, his voice tight with excitement. We have more than enough. They contacted the FBI agent who had been building the money laundering case against Hawthorne Financial Group. When he saw what they had, his response was immediate. Mrs. Hawthorne, with this evidence, we can bring RICO charges. This is not just fraud anymore. This is organized crime. Sarah looked at the empty crib in the corner of her apartment. Soon, she would fill it again. Soon, her daughter would come home. The final custody hearing was scheduled for a cold December morning. Christmas decorations sparkled in the courthouse windows, incongruously cheerful against the gray winter sky. Marcus Hawthorne arrived like a king returning to his castle. $5,000 suit, team of expensive lawyers, the smug confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences for anything in his life. He looked across the courtroom at Sarah, sitting alone with only David beside her, and he smiled. She looks defeated, he whispered to his lead attorney. This will be over by lunch. He did not notice that Sarah was smiling too. The hearing had barely begun when the courtroom doors burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear streamed into the room. Behind them came Detective Morrison, the same detective who had investigated the hit and run. Marcus Hawthorne, the lead agent announced, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and RICO violations. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Marcus's face cycled through emotions faster than Sarah could track. Confusion, disbelief, fear, rage. This is a mistake, he sputtered. I have done nothing wrong. This is all lies. You have the right to remain silent, the agent continued, snapping handcuffs around Marcus's wrists. I strongly suggest you use it. As they pulled Marcus toward the door, Sarah stood up and walked toward him. The agents paused, allowing her a moment. She looked at the man who had systematically destroyed her life, the man who had tried to take her child, her freedom, her sanity, the man who had tried to kill her and their unborn daughter. You thought I was powerless, Sarah said quietly. You spent 3 years making sure of it. No money, no job, no connections, You isolated me from my family. You turned my best friend into a spy. You tried to have me committed when I would not go quietly. And when none of that worked, you tried to murder me, Sarah, Marcus started, his voice desperate now that the reality of his situation was finally sinking in. Please, you have to understand. I was under pressure. I made mistakes. I understand perfectly. Sarah leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You thought you were marrying a helpless housewife you could manipulate and discard. But you forgot something important, Marcus. I was a lawyer before I was your wife. Did you really think I would let you win? The agents pulled him away. His screams echoed down the corridor until the doors closed behind him. Outside the courthouse, Brittany Cole was being arrested as well. She was sobbing hysterically, her designer makeup running down her face in black rivers. This is not fair, she wailed. He told me we would be together. He promised we would have everything, ma'am. The detective said flatly, You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. Rachel Bennett was next. She tried to run when she saw the officers approaching, but they caught her before she reached the end of the block. Sarah, Rachel screamed as they handcuffed her. Please, I can explain. He threatened me. He said he would destroy my career if I did not cooperate. Sarah walked past without a word. There was nothing left to say to the woman who had pretended to be her friend while selling her out at every turn. Back in the courtroom, the judge reviewed the evidence that had been presented. Given the extraordinary circumstances revealed today, the judge said, I am granting full and permanent custody of the minor child to Mrs. Sarah Hawthorne. Mr. Hawthorne's parental rights are hereby terminated. Furthermore, I am awarding Mrs. Hawthorne the full value of the hidden marital assets, totaling approximately $4.2 million, as well as 50% of all remaining marital property. Sarah broke down in tears. Maggie wrapped her arms around her. Robert wiped his eyes. Even David was crying. 2 hours later, Sarah walked into the facility where her daughter had been held in protective custody during the legal proceedings. The social worker brought out a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby's eyes were open now, alert and curious, looking up at her mother with something that might have been recognition. Sarah took her daughter in her arms for the first time since the night they had been torn apart. The baby cooed softly, one tiny hand reaching up to grasp Sarah's finger. I am so sorry, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mama is here now. No one is ever going to take you from me again. I promise you, sweetheart, I promise. The nurse smiled. What is her name? Sarah thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The darkness and the fear, the betrayals and the battles, the moments when she had wanted to give up, and the people who had refused to let her. Hope, Sarah said. Her name is Hope. Sarah stood at the window of her new office, looking out at the Charlotte skyline. The view was different from this angle. Better, somehow. Brighter. The Mitchell Foundation occupied the entire top floor of a renovated building downtown. What had started as a small nonprofit to help women escape abusive marriages had grown into something much larger. A legal aid clinic, a shelter network, a counseling center, a beacon of hope for women who had been where Sarah once was. The walls were covered with photographs, clients who had found safety, families who had been reunited, letters from women who said the foundation had saved their lives. On her desk sat a framed picture of Hope, now a year old, grinning at the camera, with 2 tiny teeth visible in her smile. She was healthy and happy and completely unaware of the nightmare that had preceded her birth. A knock at the door interrupted Sarah's thoughts. Your 2 o'clock is here, her assistant said. Send them in. The door opened to reveal a young woman, maybe 25, with haunted eyes and fresh bruises poorly hidden under makeup. She clutched her purse like a shield, looking around the office with the wary alertness of a prey animal. Sarah crossed the room and took both of the woman's hands in her own. "You are safe here," she said gently. "Whatever you need, whatever has happened, we are going to help you. I promise." The woman burst into tears. Later that afternoon, Caroline Ashford arrived for her weekly visit with Hope. The relationship between Sarah and her former mother-in-law had become something neither of them expected, not quite friendship, but something like respect, a shared understanding of what Marcus truly was, and a shared commitment to making sure Hope never knew that darkness. "Your mother is on television again," Caroline said, nodding toward the small screen in the corner of the office. Sarah turned to see Maggie Mitchell being interviewed on a national morning show, discussing resources for domestic abuse survivors. Her mother had become something of a celebrity, the fierce grandmother who had helped take down a criminal empire. "She is going to be more famous than me," Sarah laughed. "She deserves it." Caroline smiled. She raised a fighter. The door opened again. David Reynolds walked in, carrying a stack of files. He had changed in the past year. No longer the nervous young public defender she had met in that cramped legal aid office. Now he was the Foundation's chief legal counsel, confident and capable, leading a team of attorneys who had adopted Sarah's philosophy of fighting for the underdogs. "The Hawthorne case is officially closed," David said. "All appeals denied. Final sentencing confirmed. How long? 25 years. No possibility of parole." David set down the files. He will be an old man before he sees the outside of a prison cell. If he survives that long. "What do you mean?" David hesitated. "There have been some incidents. Apparently, the criminal organization Marcus was laundering money for is not happy about losing their financial conduit. He has been transferred to protective custody 3 times already." Sarah felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just a distant awareness that the man who had nearly destroyed her life was now reaping exactly what he had sown. And the others? Brittany Cole got 15 years for conspiracy and fraud. She is currently in a federal facility in West Virginia. Rachel Bennett got 5 years for obstruction of justice and perjury. She is already trying to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against some of Marcus's other associates. Sarah nodded slowly. "Then it really is over." "It is over," David confirmed. "You won." After everyone had left, Sarah sat alone in her office as the sun set over Charlotte. Hope was at home with a nanny, probably eating something she was not supposed to, and making a mess of her high chair. Sarah thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, a prisoner in a gilded cage, isolated and controlled, so beaten down that she had forgotten who she really was. She thought about the woman she had become, a mother, a lawyer, a fighter, an advocate for women who had no one else to fight for them. The journey between those 2 women had been the hardest thing she had ever done. There had been moments when she wanted to give up, moments when the darkness seemed too deep to escape, moments when she had believed the lies Marcus told about her, believed that she truly was worthless and broken and beyond saving. But she had kept fighting, and she had won. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Coming over for dinner tonight? Hope misses her grandma." Sarah smiled and typed back, "Would not miss it for the world." She gathered her things and headed for the door, pausing to look at the plaque that hung in the lobby of the Mitchell Foundation. They thought she was powerless, it read. They were wrong. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean. Sarah walked to her car, thinking about dinner with her family, thinking about Hope's smile, thinking about all the women the Foundation would help in the coming years. Marcus Hawthorne had thought he was crushing a helpless victim. He had been so very wrong, and now, surrounded by the family who had fought beside her and the life she had built from the ashes of her old one, Sarah Mitchell finally understood what real power looked like. It looked like hope. It looked like love. It looked like a woman who refused to be broken. Now, if stories about strong women overcoming impossible odds speak to your soul, you are in the right place. This channel is built for women who have been through storms and came out stronger. Women who refuse to be victims. Women who fight for themselves and for each other. This story is not just about revenge. It is about reclaiming your identity when someone tries to erase you. It is about the power of family who refuse to let you fall. And it is proof that the people who underestimate you always regret it. If you are going through something similar, remember this. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are just not finished fighting yet. If that sounds like you, or someone you want to become, hit that subscribe button and join our community. We release new stories every week. And trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be completely different than you thought? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the content we create here. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let me tell you how Sarah Mitchell went from homeless and pregnant to watching her husband get dragged away in handcuffs. Let us begin. This content was carefully researched, crafted, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories with real lessons. Every detail was chosen to inspire, educate, and remind you of your own strength. Thank you for being here. Now go be someone's hope today.